up on this Wednesday edition of Newsline at noon, President Park Geun-hye launches her new cabinet to spur economic recovery and stamp out bad practices in the country. New Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan vows to push for bold stimulus policies until the economy gets back on track. Plus, the so-called BRICS nations agreed to establish their own development bank as they look to reshape the current Western-dominated global financial system. These stories and more on Newsline at noon. It's noon Wednesday, July 16th here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. Live from Seoul, I'm Ju.
And I'm Mark Broom. Very good to have you with us. Now, following a series of failed personnel nominations, President Park Geun-hye, with a long list of state affairs hanging in the balance, announced the appointment of 5 new cabinet members on this Wednesday.
Seeking greater cooperation with the National Assembly, the president is determined to move forward in running the nation. Choi You-sun has more.
President Park Geun-hye has appointed 5 of her cabinet nominees who were confirmed by Parliament last week. Her spokesperson said the president appointed Choi Kyung-hwan as the new finance minister and deputy prime minister and Lee Byung-kee as the head of the National Intelligence Service on Tuesday. She also appointed Choi Yang-hee, Ki-kweon, and Kim Hee-jung as the ministers of science, labor, and gender equality, respectively. The president, who retained the current prime minister after her 2 previous nominees stepped aside and who withdrew her nomination for education minister Tuesday, cannot afford further delays in handing over state affairs to her new cabinet. After dropping Education Minister-designate Kim Myung-soo, who was grilled by Parliament over allegations of thesis plagiarism, President Park quickly nominated Hwang Woo-yeol, her political aide and a prominent figure within the ruling party. Hwang is close to the president, and if confirmed by the National Assembly, he would join new Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan as the president's 2 deputy prime ministers, a move likely intended to expand cooperation with the parliament. Meeting with the ruling party's new leader Kim Hee-jung Tuesday, President Park stressed the need for her new cabinet and the party leadership to cooperate on a series of bills to revitalize the economy and others to reform the government and public sector in the aftermath of April's ferry tragedy. She also talked about having more frequent dialogue with the opposition party in a meeting with the floor leadership of the ruling and opposition sides last week. Meanwhile, Culture Minister nominee Chung Sung-keun, who was not confirmed by the National Assembly, dropped his bid Wednesday morning. Choi You-sun, Arirang News.
The 5 new cabinet ministers got straight to work this morning, and in his first day on the job, Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan promised to aggressively pursue steps to stimulate the economy until it picks up momentum. Our economics correspondent Na Hyun-kyung has the details.
Low growth, a downsized economy in pursuit of better place, an absence of notable results. I think this is the reality we are faced with.
New Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan has made it clear that he will be proactive in his new role. In his inauguration speech Wednesday, Choi said passive macroeconomic policies have caused the Korean economy to slow down and have also resulted in less tax revenue. One of his plans to tackle those problems was to reform unnecessary restrictions that keep businesses from finding new investment opportunities.
When companies do well, they will, in return, create more jobs and up the earnings for households, which will spend more. We need to establish this virtuous cycle in order to strengthen domestic demand.
As he has long been hinting since being nominated, Choi reiterated plans to ease the debt-to-income and loan-to-value ratio regulations for mortgage loans to prop up the real estate market. Choi said it's inevitable that the nation's growth outlook will be revised down, but added the ministry will not seek a supplementary budget this year. Experts say the biggest challenge for Choi will be boosting consumer sentiment, which dipped after the April Seoul ferry disaster, and also breathing life into the sluggish housing market without drastically increasing household debt. Na Hyun-kyung, Arirang News.
South Korea's chief nuclear envoy Hwang Jun-guk will meet with his Japanese counterpart Junichi Ihara for talks in Tokyo on this Wednesday. North Korea's recent military provocations will top the agenda, along with ways to restart the six-party nuclear talks. The multilateral dialogue aimed at denuclearizing North Korea includes the two Koreas, the U.S., China, Japan, and Russia, that has been at a standstill since 2008. Amid rumors of a possible visit by Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to North Korea, the two nuclear envoys will also touch upon Tokyo's recent discussions with Pyongyang. Seoul and Washington have expressed concerns that Japan's talks with the North might affect their trilateral alliance. And on a higher level between Washington and Beijing, U.S. President Barack Obama has been speaking with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping about the North Korean nuclear issue. Obama wants the two sides to work more closely together to pressure Pyongyang to give up its nuclear weapons. Kim Hee-jung reports.
The White House says that during telephone talks this week, Obama told Chinese President Xi Jinping that the two sides have to enhance their communication and coordination to make progress on the North Korean nuclear issue. Obama also said their bilateral relationship should be defined by increased practical cooperation and the constructive management of differences. This could indicate the two superpowers might expand their existing communication channels or add an additional line to enhance cooperation. Multilateral dialogue, known as the six-party talks, used to be the main line of communication dealing with North Korea's nuclear weapons program, but they haven't been held since 2008. Experts say Washington is well aware of the severity of the North Korean nuclear issue and is trying to encourage Beijing to pressure Pyongyang to come back to the negotiating table. U.S.-China relations have become increasingly strained in recent months amid maritime disputes in the South China Sea, accusations of cyber espionage, human rights issues, as well as their strategy on North Korea. Obama and Xi are scheduled to meet in Beijing in November at a nations summit. Kim Hee-jung, Arirang News.
The United States says any effort to liken North Korea's missile launches to its joint military exercises with South Korea is inappropriate. U.S. State Department spokesperson Jen Psaki said Tuesday local time that the North's missile launches are conducted without warning and are clearly designed to raise tensions, while the annual military drills between South Korea and the U.S. have been carried out regularly and openly for about 40 years. Pyongyang fired off multiple artillery shells into the East Sea on Monday, one day after another round of missile launches. North Korea watchers say the provocations are in protest against the joint South Korean-US exercises that begin on this Wednesday. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe says US troops stationed in Japan would need Tokyo's prior approval before engaging in a combat situation should an emergency arise on the Korean peninsula. The Japanese leader was speaking in Parliament on Tuesday. Prior approval is needed under the Tokyo-Washington Security Pact when dispatching US troops stationed in Japan for combat outside the country. Abe also defended his controversial push to expand his country's military role, saying it's only limited in its scope. He said Tokyo would require a formal constitutional amendment to engage in collective self-defense similar to that of other countries. The UN Human Rights Committee has begun a regular two-day examination of Japan's human rights record. According to Japan's Kyodo news agency, 18 legal experts from the United Nations body are looking at a number of issues dating back to the Japanese military's forced sexual enslavement of women during the Second World War. They'll also examine more current issues, including Japanese nationalist groups that hold regular demonstrations against ethnic Koreans and immigrants and the state's use of capital punishment. The committee requires states that have ratified the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights to submit reports on their human rights records every 5 years. At the end of the month, the committee will advise Japan on areas where improvements are needed. Now, it's a landmark deal. The leaders of the BRICS nations are forging a multi-billion-dollar financial alliance. The world's top 5 emerging economies agreed on Tuesday to establish a development bank to rival Western-dominated institutions like the IMF and the World Bank. Connie Kim reports on the landmark agreement that could radically overhaul the existing global financial order.
The leaders of the 5 BRICS nations have signed a deal to launch a $100 billion development bank and a currency reserve pool with the aim of challenging Western-dominated institutions like the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. The new development bank, announced at the 6th BRICS Summit in Fortaleza, Brazil on Tuesday, will fund infrastructure projects in the founding members, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, as well as other developing nations. With its headquarters in Shanghai and India as president the first year, the bank will start out with $50 billion in capital, with each BRICS country paying in an equal amount. Total capital is expected to eventually double to $100 billion. A so-called contingent reserve arrangement will also be created where each country will put in a designated amount in case of a currency crisis. The contingency fund will amount to $100 billion, with China contributing $41 billion, followed by Brazil, Russia, and India putting in $18 billion each, and South Africa chipping in $5 billion. BRICS represents about 42% of the world's population and accounts for roughly 1/5 of the world economy. The launch of the institution is being seen as a landmark achievement as the 5 countries started summit talks in 2009 to counter the influence of the West. If everything goes according to plan, the new development bank will start lending in 2016. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Time now for a look through the rest of the international headlines we're following on this Wednesday. For that, we turn to our Eunice Kim, standing by, as always, at the News Center.
Eunice, it was a harrowing morning commute for hundreds of Russians yesterday when things went horribly wrong and their subway derailed underground.
Indeed, Jinju, investigators in Moscow are still trying to determine what caused that subway to derail during morning rush hour on Tuesday. At least 21 people were killed and dozens more injured in that crash, and our Kim Hee-jung has the story.
During rush hour on Tuesday morning, a crowded subway train went off the rails in Moscow. More than 24 hours later, Russian authorities say at least 21 people are dead and more than 100 are injured. The death toll is expected to rise as dozens among the hospitalized are in critical condition. The crash took place around 8:35 a.m. local time when 3 cars on the train, which was traveling at 70 kilometers per hour, braked suddenly between 2 stations in the west of the capital city.
I was in the very front carriage, and it was a great shock. The lights went out and people fell to the ground.
The train stopped abruptly, and the passengers fell to one side. There was smoke, and we were trapped inside.
The exact cause of the crash has not yet been determined, but emergency officials blame a power surge that scrambled the metro's electronic control systems.
We are investigating all possible causes of the crash, except for one which we have ruled out, a terrorist attack.
Moscow's mayor has declared a day of mourning for the dead. The capital's subway system is used by some 11 million people every day, and despite being one of the world's oldest underground railways, fatal accidents like this one are rare. Kim Hee-jung, Arirang News.
Israel has resumed airstrikes on the Gaza Strip and warned of an intensified offensive after Hamas rejected a ceasefire proposed by Egypt. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he had no choice but to widen and increase its aerial operation. This as Israel saw its first casualty in the 8-day-old conflict. Israel had held its fire for some 6 hours before resuming its aerial assault in the afternoon. Hamas said it could not accept a truce that offered no real gains for the faction, particularly as nearly 200 Palestinians now have been killed in the conflict. It called for more international mediation that could prevent future clashes. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry says there are still very real gaps in the West's negotiations with Iran on the fate of its nuclear program, boosting the likelihood that a pact will not be reached by the July 20th deadline. America's top diplomat has been engaged in talks with his Iranian counterpart, joined by the foreign ministers of Britain, France, and Germany in Vienna to curb Iran's nuclear activities in exchange for ending sanctions. Kerry said negotiations will continue at least through Sunday. The main sticking point is Iran's nuclear enrichment program, which Tehran has maintained it needs to make nuclear fuel and said it intends to expand. The U.S. wants to cut it, fearing it could be used to manufacture the core of nuclear missiles. Is the happiest place on earth the safest place for children? A report by CNN has found 35 employees at Disney World in Florida were arrested for alleged child sex offenses in the past 8 years. The accused held jobs as ride repair manager, character actor, and gift shop worker, and faced charges such as trying to meet a minor for sexual acts and possession of child pornography. A 6-month study of police and court records also found 5 employees at Universal Studios and 2 at SeaWorld, both in Florida, had similar charges. None of the victims were from the theme parks where the accused worked.
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea. Connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on Newsline at noon with Mark Broom and Jin-ju.
I'm Jin-ju.
Market researcher, strategy analytics said Thursday that LG Electronics brought in about 11.
The job figures for June are out. The number of Koreans in work edged up from a year earlier, but job creation posted a smaller increase compared to recent months. Statistics Korea says the number of employed people in the nation stood at a little less than 25.9 million, up almost 400,000 compared to the same month last year. The monthly increase has been on the decline since February, when it stood at nearly 835,000. The jobless rate in June, meanwhile, was 3.5%, down 0.4 percentage points from a year earlier. Officials say labor market conditions have worsened due to sluggish domestic consumption in the wake of April's ferry disaster. A new study suggests that government support designed to get companies to invest more in research and development is having the desired effect. The study conducted by the Korea Institute of S&T Evaluation and Planning says that when the government increases its R&D budget by 1%, business enterprises increase their R&D investments by up to 0.2 percentage points within 2 years. The institute says government R&D also induces an increase in labor productivity, particularly among small and mid-sized companies. Korea has been pumping more and more money into R&D in recent years, and this year's budget dedicated to R&D is $17 billion, up more than 4% compared to last year. The Brazil World Cup came to a close earlier this week with Germany taking home the trophy, but they weren't the only ones happy with how the World Cup panned out, though. Korea's biggest tech firm saw their ultra-high-definition TV sales go through the roof as fans bought new TVs to watch the matches. Samsung Electronics says its UHD TV sales in Korea doubled in June compared to the previous month, and sales of curved UHD TVs grew at a similar rate. LG Electronics says its sales nearly tripled in the second quarter compared to the first quarter. A major electronics store chain says TVs were their biggest selling item this year as consumers decided to upgrade to watch the World Cup in ultra-high quality.
Now, a growing number of college students are choosing to spend their summer breaks right here in Korea, but not on vacation, but to shore up their academic credentials. They're taking advantage of Korean universities that offer summer courses, and they're gaining a better understanding of Korea in the process. Shin Se-min reports.
Socializing with Korean students and immersing themselves in cultural activities. Students from over a dozen different countries gather at a Korean campus. They are taking part in an international summer course program for students and professors that a growing number of private universities in Korea provide. With nearly 100,000 international students currently residing in the nation, more colleges are designing programs and scholarship opportunities in hopes of bringing the world to Korea. To differentiate their experiences while spending the summer in Korea, universities have expanded the number of science and technology-related courses, which is something students expect due to Korea's tech-heavy reputation. Universities also send students outside the classroom and into internships at Korean-based companies, organizations, and even broadcasting stations. The opportunity to spend a summer overseas while adding college credits isn't reserved for those with money readily available.
As a non-profit organization, we, the university, have the obligation to foster young students regardless of their background. So we try to broaden our view by inviting students from developing countries and eventually letting globalization work on our campus.
Great benefit for us because we get to come here with the scholarship so that we can have a good opportunity to stay here, like learn about new things of Korea people.
Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now in some cultural news, a new photo exhibition in Seoul features the works of an American photographer, Jordan Matter, who first gained worldwide recognition for his much-lauded project called Dancers Among Us. He's now premiering more than 60 new images in Korea, and our Park Geun-hye sat down with him to find out what inspires him.
It's all about the joy and passion of being alive. None of these images have been digitally modified, and the dancers and the photos aren't relying on the help of wires or trampolines to enhance their jumps. Photographer Jordan Matter's works aim to reflect the beauty and wonders of everyday life, capturing what he calls that one magical moment.
You go through this series of events every single day that we just pass through without any sort of like recognition of their beauty and of the specialness of them. The magical moments means to me stack all of the moments of your life up together and make each one as magical as possible.
First inspired by his 3-year-old son, who was living a life full of joy and full of wonder in the moment, Matter came up with the idea of taking pictures through the eyes of a child. He thought dancers would best represent the beauty of each passing moment.
They embody this kind of beauty and this emotion, and they're able to physicalize that and show us a story. And so it made perfect sense if I wanted to create and almost make the ordinary extraordinary in a way and show everyday moments, but make them more extreme and more beautiful.
His works have touched the hearts of many, and his book, Dancers Among Us, made the New York Times bestseller list. He says for the best results, he always lets spontaneous moments happen.
All of it is serendipity. All of it is luck. If you can try to allow life to happen and then to react to it, as opposed to trying to hold on so tightly and control it, if you can let go of control a bit, then you will be very happy to see all of the surprises that await you.
During his stay in Korea, he will collaborate with Korean dancers and Taekwondo martial artists to capture more magical images that represent the wonders of life. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. Well, lingering monsoon rain from yesterday has completely let up in the southern regions, but clouds should stick around throughout the day, whereas the central region is expected to have a fair amount of sunshine. And with the sunshine, the upper regions will see a daily high in the low 30s, a bit higher than yesterday, while many regions in the south will remain below 30 degrees Celsius. But tomorrow and Friday, another round of monsoon rain rain is in the forecast nationwide, even here in Seoul, but it should be more like sprinkles than rain, not enough for drought relief. So please do keep this in mind, and let's take a closer look at the readings for today. The high in Seoul will rise to 32, while Daegu and Gwangju will have a daily highs of 31 and 28 respectively, and Busan should make it to 26 this afternoon. And for other regions, Jeju Island and Daejeon should see highs of 27 and 31, and Dokdo will reach 27. Now, with hot temperatures, haze, and high humidity, the discomfort index will increase as we head into the midday. So take it easy and have a wonderful day. Now, that's all for Korea, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, those are the stories we're following at this hour.
Mark and I'll be back at the same time tomorrow. Thank you for watching.